All right, so let me give you a little demonstration on Silver Peak. So this is the orchestrator itself. This is where we'll deploy our Edge Connect appliance. And I'm sorry, I keep on still using Silver Peak. I kind of use the term Silver Peak and Edge Connect interchangeably, but just realize they're kind of one and the same. We're moving to the new name. Over here are my appliances, and each one of these are I would say sites or groups of appliances. And then I'm going to kind of go with a Futurama theme as I go through this. I find if I do this, sometimes it makes it easier to remember certain things. As you can see, when you first log in as a new user, you're going to get a dashboard. If I grab all the appliances, this dashboard reflects all that information. If I just grab a site, right, the data changes to be just that site. And because you can have multiple appliances under a site, and that's what these are. These are appliances. All right, I could select that, and that will change to be just that appliance data. Now, I know we've got two appliances. The icons look a little different here. Basically, what we're looking at is this icon here is a physical appliance. So we have an actual Silver Peak appliance inside our environment. And then this device here is a virtual Silver Peak. So you can bring up a Silver Peak appliance as a virtual machine inside your environment. And that's what this is over here. So again, I'm just trying to get your head wrapped around, what we're looking at when you see context over here. All right, right now I'm looking at everything. And as we select things, you're going to notice tabs are going to open up going across. Now, certainly we can go up to these menu items and start selecting, and some of these menus certainly look large. I wouldn't let them scare you too much. When I first looked at this, I'm like, oh, there's gonna be a lot to learn, but you'll find there's a few places that you'll work in. I find that this search really works well. So since we're using SD-WAN style technologies, this thing's got to form tunnels, right? So if I search tunnel, right, I get all the menus, and this would be the menu context if I went over here and select configuration and went through. So net configuration, networking, tunnels exceptions. I'm going to select tunnels and tunnels. That sounds like what I want, right? So if I select that, we can see overlay, underlay, and pass through. So let's start our conversation about what we're looking at here as far as the tunnels are. So pass through, those are just tunnels that are going out to the internet. So split traffic. So if you're at a site, is the information destined to a resource out on the internet, or is it destined to another site in their internal network configuration? So pass through would be going out to the internet. Underlay, those will be the tunnels going to the two different sites. So if I look back at my dashboard, right, as soon as this comes up, I have two different sites. I have at landing site 1, I have Fry, the first site, and then Leela is at landing site 2. So they're over in the south, and the other one's over on the west, right? And that's what we're looking at when we see here. We see the tunnel from Fry to Leela. And these are labels, and we'll talk a little bit about labels as we go through this. And this is from Leela to Fry, again, using those labels, and we can see that they're both up. So these are the underlay tunnels. They do IPsec, so they're encrypted tunnels. And then there's overlay tunnels, which are GRE tunnels, right? And overlay tunnels are created to actually massage our applications on our network, right? So we have to talk a little bit about business intent overlays or BIOS. Brandis kind of brought those up yesterday. So let's take a look at that. And if you could see over here, the overlay, critical apps, default, bulk apps, real time, and then another duplicate for the secondary site over here. So let's look at that. So I could certainly do business. Oops, I did it again. Business intent overlays here. Or I could have just went over here and selected business intent over. And notice another tab opens up. So now I only have the dashboard, right? I have the tunnels, and then I have the business intent overlays. And when you log out and log back in, right, these tabs will stay in place, right? They'll be there when you come back in. So the most frequent places you go, right, will always show up. That's why I say don't let the menuing kind of take you back. You're going to find what you use can be found within the search, right? And you'll probably have the tab already created for it. So at any rate, these are the business intent overlays. Again, this is how we're going to massage traffic across our networks. All right, and we see two sides of this. We see a breakout traffic. Again, this is traffic that's destined for the internet, and this is SD-WAN traffic. This is traffic that's destined for another site. Now, this works a little bit like an access control list, I would say, in the way that it'll work from top to bottom. And if the packet hits one of these, right, it'll enact that. All right, so think about it like that. So when your application hits one of these, it'll enact that. Now, I'm going to open this up. Keep in mind, there's SD-WAN traffic and breakout traffic. So I'm going to double click on this on the real-time apps. All right, so first we can see the topology that they're in. You get choice of different typologies if you want to. All right. Next, you can see that label. You probably don't remember, but when I was showing you how the tunnels were created, they were created with labels in mind. So as long as these labels are of the same group and they're applied to a WAN interface, so if you apply one of these labels to a WAN interface, it'll start automatically forming tunnels with other sites with the same labels that are in the same grouping together. Right, so that's what, and I don't want to spend a lot of time in here. I just want to get your head wrapped around a little bit what we're looking about. We've got some service level objectives, which might kick over into some backup strategies if you want. So I definitely don't have all these connections. I just have INET 1 and INET 2 kind of set up. We could see a link bonding policy. I think what's most important, what apps are getting directed by this business intent overlay, and that will be up here. So if I edit this over here, we can see all these applications are a part of this real-time business intent overlay. If I don't like what I see, I can add a rule, right? Edit this rule. All right, and I could choose whatever I want, and there's a variety of things that we could do. Now, you can spend a lot of time in configuring these if you want to, but what I find for 80% of circumstances, these business intent overlays that I have set up came with the product, were already pre-set up. They will work for most environments. Use these and then tweak them to your customers' needs, and that's would be my recommendation. So again, those are those apps for this one, for the real-time one. We'll just open up this one too, all right? And then we could see these are these apps associated with this business intent overlay. And then I won't go through them all. We'll just go right down to the bottom. And here's the default business. So if your data that comes across this SD-WAN device doesn't match anything else, this will match everything, and then it'll apply this rule to it. All right, so that is kind of how this operates. So certainly you have the underlay IPsec tunnels, and then we have the overlay tunnels, right, that are connected. And again, here are those labels. All right, so before I go any further, I kind of want to discuss, what I have set up here. So certainly, if I go over to the dashboard, I have 2 sites set up now. We're going to bring on a third site. Actually, we're going to bring on a WAN link and a third site. So let me just show you this diagram real quick, and let's kind of talk through this. So this is what we're going to end up setting up in the end. So again, we can see all the Futurama arrows. So at site 1, we have Fry. At site 2, we have Leela and Zoiberg, and we're going to bring on vendor over here. Now, at site 1, I have 2 WAN connections. Right now, WAN 1 isn't forming a tunnel, and I'll show you why in a little bit. Site 2, I have 2 LAN connections. I certainly could have done VLANs if I felt like it, but I used 2 separate LAN connections. And then, like I said, site 3 isn't it. Now, I don't want you to commit this to memory. I might bring it up and show you, but what I think is important to note here is, or what you should know is the LAN side interface always ends in a 0, and the client always ends in a 1. So 111 will be the client, 110 will be the interface on the device. You can see that over here as well as this secondary site. Now I had each site, if you look over here, the 181, the 1 in this will talk, it kind of relates back to the site. You can see 183. This will be the third site, and Leela is 182, so that'll be the second site. I tried to make it easy so you could follow along, but you don't have to commit this to memory. I'll try to make it easier for you to understand. You'll kind of get your head wrapped around it as we kind of go through this. And because I didn't have a site to put Zoidberg, and I guess everybody forgets about Zoidberg, I put him on 184, so he's over here. That's kind of how we're set up. All right, so currently we're set up with 2 sites. And I mentioned that Fry only has one WAN connection up and rolling, or should only have one WAN connection up and rolling. So WAN 1 is not creating tunnels right now. So let's take a look at that. So over here is the Fry appliance, and I'm going to look in deployment of this appliance. You'll spend a lot of time within the deployment interface to deploy some things. And when we deploy our new site, we'll talk to this in a little bit more detail, but we can see the LAN interface. We can see there are firewall zones. Maybe we'll tinker with that a little bit. Here's my inside interface, right? And here's my 2 WAN interfaces over here. You can see I'm using DHCPN1. There are firewall modes. I think this is important to talk about. There is allow all, which all traffic will flow, right, between all the sites. There is stateful, and basically what that says is it's going to pass all traffic, whether it's destined for the internet or local, is going to be passed through the SD-WAN, and you better have some path out to the internet somewhere. Now, if you want to do the split tunnel type of setup where traffic destined to the internet, escapes locally, right? And traffic destined for the WAN stays on the WAN. That would be stateful plus net. And hardened means just the appliance can talk in the environment. It's not going to pass any data whatsoever. But at any rate, labels are what's going to form our tunnel. So right now, INET1 is forming a tunnel. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to select INET2 and click save on this. All right. So we're going to click save. You remember our tunnels here, right? If I look at my underlays, I just have these 2, INET1 to INET1, but we're going to start to see another INET3 INET2 pop up in here. Now, sometimes I need to kind of move this along. It does change, but a little bit too long for my demonstration purposes. So sometimes if I do a refresh, right, we could see things happening a little bit quicker. Let's see. Okay, so we could see this new INET1 to INET2 tunnel. Now, I didn't have to put in IP addresses. I didn't have to configure any encryption protocol or anything like that. It's just doing that on its own behalf. So I'm bringing up this other website. I assigned it a label, and then it'll connect. And labels are just that. Like if I wanted to create another label, I can go into creating another label, just give it a name, no other configuration, and then I could utilize that and configure that as a part of the groups that are out there. And again, let's refresh this again. See if this guy's come up yet. It shouldn't take too long. All right, you can see that that's active. And if I go back to my overlays, you can see INET1 and INET2 have been added to that as well. All right, so that's just bringing up a WAN connection. It gives you kind of an example of how these tunnels are formed. We also had a discussion about the labels, and tunnels form based on the labels and what group those labels are in. All right, so right now, if I go back to my diagram, right, we've got tunnels that are from site 1, landing site 1, to landing site 2. So with that being said, right, I don't have any rules or anything in place. This is just kind of open. So Fry should be able to ping Leela. Fry should be able to ping Zoidberg, and Leela should be able to ping Zoidberg. Everybody should be able to ping everybody from these 2 sides. But because Bender isn't online yet, we won't get any pings out of that. So let's look at that real quick. Let's make sure that that's happening. So over here is my site 1. All right, so Leela is at site 2, and 111 was her client. All right, so certainly we're getting replies from that site. So let's go to Mr. Zoidberg, who's at 4. All right, and that's certainly answering as well. And then let's try Bender. He was at site 3. So again, 3 and 111 is his client. We'll head on her, and we could see that we're going to start the timeout with that. So we can do that. Let's do Leela as well, right? We'll have Leela ping Fry. All right, so at the first site, his client, certainly we get a reply. Can Leela ping Zoidberg? Yep, Leela can ping Zoidberg. So again, Leela can ping Fry. Leela can ping Zoidberg over here. But again, can Leela ping Bender, who is at the third site, which he should not. Right. Right. And then we could also look at Zoidberg again. So Zoidberg can obviously hit the first site. So let's just see if he can hit the third site. All right. So certainly he can't hit the third site. And then at Bender's site, the third site, I'm already running pings. So you can see that they're timing out. We can see who we're pinging up here. So again, there's Fry's site, site 1, that's the client, site 2, and that's the client. And then this one here is, there it is. There's Zoidberg, and there's his client as well. And you can see all across the board, we're getting a timeouts or destination unreachable. All right. So I need to bring up the next site. Now over here, let me dismiss this. You could see that the appliances have been discovered, right? So we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to go over here. We can see there's an appliance here, and I'm going to click approve. Now, this is going to be another virtual appliance that we're bringing online, but I'm bringing it up like a physical appliance. So let me talk about what the differences are as far as that's concerned. When you get a physical appliance, it already knows, you know, if you look on the back of it, for example, I have an XS model of this. When you look on the back, it'll have, you know, WAN 0, WAN 1, LAN 1, LAN 0, as well as management 0 and management 1. Those are hard coded to NIC adapters or MAC addresses, right? So it's hard coded. So the appliance knows what MAC addresses are associated with each of those ports. When you bring up a virtual machine as an appliance, right, VMware hasn't kind of created those MAC addresses, and they'll create it. So the extra step for virtual appliances is you have to associate those ports with MAC addresses, and you can kind of do that through kind of a menu interface in the console. But you have to go through that. But what I will bring up is like if it was a physical appliance. So as long as this appliance can get out to the internet and the appliance is associated with your account, which it should be when you buy it, right? That serial number should automatically be associated. You will see this appliance discover, and you can approve. And you can see now what's popped up is it wants to upgrade the appliance. I know these appliances are already at the same firmware, but you do want to have them at the same firmware. So I'm going to click skip. And now we're going to go through the process of actually deploying the third site as soon as this populates. So this will, in a second, usually takes a couple seconds, a little bit longer than I wish. All right, so your appliance, when it comes up, it'll just be labeled Silver Peak is what I'll come up as. Obviously, I just labeled this so to make it a little bit quicker for us. Now I want to add it to a group, right? Now this will be one of these groups over here. All right, we're going to put them on the third landing site. So we're going to select that, and then we got to obviously give a password. Right. And then you can put the address in, and it'll kind of figure out where you are based on your WAN connection. You can put a site name. Did I type these in wrong? Let me try that again. Hang on a second here. Am I not getting that? Am I not writing that right? Let me try that again. Yeah, it's gonna let me go anyways. Okay. If you have sites that are not of the same, you have appliances at the same site, and you don't want them to form tunnels, you just give them the same site name. Let me click next. This guy's not letting me move forward. Hang on a second here, you guys. Let me try the deployment one more time. Hang on a second here, Todd. All right, let's approve this again. Skip that part. Wait for this to come up. All right, we'll put him on the third landing site. We'll try this password again. There we go. We'll click next. All right, next we got to look at our deployment profile, I would say. So certainly we leave it for server. This is just going to talk to the internet. Bridge is obviously a bridge connection. I would say probably most people are going to do a routed type of connection. Now I'm going to expand this out over here so we can see a little more of that. All right, so certainly we can pick the interface. We can set the VLAN if we wanted to. We might come back and do something with the firewalls. What we really need is an IP for the appliance, for the LAN on the appliance. So what I'm going to plug in is this IP address over here, because this will be on the appliance side. 192.168.183.110. There we go. All right, and we're going to give it a label because we want it to start forming tunnels. All right, so we'll do INET1 because that was part of the first group, which will form tunnels with INET1 as well as INET2. We could set a firewall. We don't want to allow all. We're going to do split traffic. And then over here, you want to put in the bandwidth your ISP is giving you. So in this case, we're going to do 30 megs. We're going to calculate that on out. And then if you're going to use the boost licenses, you could tack that in down here. Usually a real rough rule of thumb is about half your bandwidth, but certainly your mileage will change. Certainly your mileage may change. So we'll click next again. If you want to do loopback interfaces, you could certainly set that up. We'll click next one more time. Put our routing rules. I definitely want to advertise my local LAN subnets. We're going to click next one more time. Over here, those business and intent overlays, how we were massaging traffics, could be layered on. If you had more than this, you could select them or put them in place. So if you had that whole series, remember I said you go from top to bottom. If you want to skip one of those, you could pull that out. Default templates, right? There is templates that you could set up, and if I had multiple set up, they'd show up under here as well, and I could pick and choose which one I would want to use. You could see we could have default routes, date and time, and mid distance, and things like that, as well as much more we can put in that. But that's a lot of out of scope of what we're going to do today. And what I'm going to do is click apply, and then we'll see this go through and actually deploy this solution. So we could see it's been successful. Now it's going to take a little bit of time for this to come up, so I'll have to tap dance a little bit. All right, even though it says it's done, we're going to click close. We're getting some messages over here. Not to worry, it says it's not registering or it's not having a license yet. It will get all of that, and it will bring that back in the environment. And what will happen is once this all comes up, all right, we're going to see all these sites start to ping with each other. So Fry should be able to ping Bender. Zoidberg should be able to ping Bender. Bender should be able to ping on everybody else. All right, once that is done. But now, if you think about it, all these tunnels are being orchestrated. And this is kind of the magic of SD-WAN, right? I don't need to configure site-to-site VPN connections. As a matter of fact, we're doing much more than connecting a site-to-site VPN connection. We're also massaging the applications and how they're going to traverse our SD-WAN environment, right? And we're making decisions as to where they'll go, right? But obviously, at this point, a lot of times people will say, well, if everybody is going to be able to ping everybody, what are my controls to stop something from that to happen? Or maybe there's only certain traffic I might want to pitch around. So we'll take a look at that. So I'm going to refresh a little bit because sometimes we can get a little bit more context out of it. So what I'm looking at here, I'm going up to appliances, and we're going to go to tunnels, and we're going to wait for additional underlay tunnels to come up, and we're waiting for that to happen. and we'll see the third site comes up. What'll happen is this guy will go offline and it'll come back online, and we'll start to see the underlay tunnel being formed, and then we'll see the overlay tunnels being formed. And again, that's all happening on my behalf inside this environment. So there it goes. There, I shouldn't have refreshed it, but there it goes. It's going off site. When it comes back up, we'll start to witness the tunnel start to form. There's vendor 3. All right, if we look under overlay, we'll start to see that as well. All right, so let's go back to what I was talking about. So now all sites are going to be able to talk to all sites. So, what if I wanted to put some type of rules in place so certain sites can't talk to each other? Well, if you remember here, right, I've got 2 WAN connections over here, so 2 LAN connections. Right, so we might tinker with that a little bit. So first, let's look at firewall. Right, we've got firewall zones over here. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see I have a default zone. Default zones created automatically. As a matter of fact, all these sites right now are part of the default zone. I'll show you where that's set up. Right, but I also have this Futurama deny zone. And zones are just zones. Like it's just labels. So if I added this, I give it a name. All right, and then this would be a zone. All right. And I could use that. Now it's how you set up your rules for the zone that make a difference. All right, so let's refresh, see if anything's happening yet. All right, we're starting to come up. No, not yet. We got a little bit more. All right, so she's still working on it, but she will come up. She's getting her license and everything. So again, let's go back to the firewall discussion. So I certainly have firewall zones. And if I go under here, we'll search firewall again. We got firewall zone security policy. So if I select that, these would be each of the zones inside this environment. So I could do something like, we could edit maybe Fry. Let this come up in a second or two. And you could see right now, default is allow all to all, right? But Futurama is denying to all. Right, so we could tinker with that and change different rules, and that's not too hard. I just got to select that, add a rule, and then we could edit that rule if we wanted to and change the context of that. And this will come up in a second. And I could do pretty much anything under the sun if I wanted to. So certainly application group applications, but if I start looking at more options, we've got a lot of things. Maybe we'll massage something in our environment. Okay. All right, so let's see how we're doing here. Let's refresh this. All right, we could probably see, if we go back to tunnels, we can see some tunnels are starting to form. These are underlay tunnels that are forming right now. And then we will see overlay tunnels. And again, all these tunnels are being created on my behalf. And again, this is kind of the promise of SD-WAN is seeing these type of things come up yet. And again, not yet. Sometimes you get the interface to kind of come up. Oh, looks like she's cleaning up. Let's refresh. All right, so it looks like all our tunnels are up and they're active. So the underlay tunnels are up, as well as the overlay tunnels are up. All right, and if I go to these sites, and it might take a little bit. Okay, now we're starting to see the replies starting to happen from each of these sites. Right, vendor can reply everybody. But now let's go back to that firewall rule discussion real quick. So where you apply the firewall in of itself is at the deployment. So for example, Leela has the ability for me to add firewalls to it. They all actually, these all do, but I can add them, these zones on the inside or on the outside. So if I add it on the outside, it's going to start blocking the traffic like holistically, but maybe I just want LAN 1, and LAN 1's kind of connected to Zoidberg, so maybe I want to stop him from talking to everybody. So right now he's pinging. All right, so if I went over here, I change that firewall zone to Futurama deny, we'll click save, and it should happen pretty quick. All right, but we should see that he's starting to time out. Right, and then if I wanted to do something like open this up so he could go and maybe get a connection to do RDP, we could certainly go in and create those rules. But we have a lot of control as to what we can pass across this SD-WAN, what we can control and what we can allow, and where we want the traffic to flow in the environment with business intent overlays, right, in our environment. And we could see, if you remember, when we started, we only had, right, 2 tunnels formed, but we've expanded that out to all these underlay tunnels and then even more overlay tunnels. All right, so I think that's where I'll kind of stop with my demonstration, and I'll maybe pass this back to Brandon. Brandon, are you there?